coin traders? How's it going? Thanks for joining me for the show. Looking at Polygon MATIC, MATIC on that ticker. Kind of been a little rough for MATIC lately, especially since the start of last year. So haven't really seen too much out of MATIC. Now we are still sitting at the number 18 spot with a total market cap over $7.2 billion. So haven't necessarily seen MATIC fall out of the spotlight and hype just yet. But we know that we have struggled a lot, especially with a lot of other L2 names coming in. And now we even have some new hype for L3. But yeah, anyway, want to go ahead and look at this chart and talk about pretty much what we are expecting, especially since we're not actually doing that great over the start of about the fall of the end of the year, kind of when we did have our initial fall rally. So ever since we had our fall rally back October 2023, rallied up to the first trend high 118%, and then finally got this second little trend up to the middle of March. Total gains about 155%, so not necessarily that much, kind of in line with some of the other slower and kind of older cryptos. But anyway, nonetheless, so especially after looking at a pullback all the way down to the low 54%, so a pretty big pullback given the amount of gains that we've actually seen to the upside. Now, not necessarily that much more of a pullback than a lot of other cryptos have been seeing, since we have been seeing 50 to 60% pullbacks on this recent move. But what is significant about this 50 to 60% pullback, or 54% pullback rather, is that we actually have put in a new price lower low. So we've already had a more than 100% retracement, and that's also coming off of the fact that this low coming in before the trend high was actually putting in a new lower low compared to all of this sideways chop consolidation point for MATIC Polygon. So we've really been seeing a lot of struggle. And then if we actually want to go ahead and look at the volumes too, you can see just how minimal the volumes have been. And even on the big moves, this is where we saw our peak. This wasn't even the peak of the trend. So even on the slow, steady uptrend to the upside, putting in the trend high, which did put in a high of 129, you can see that we weren't even looking at our peak volume coming in then. So pretty minimal, although albeit a very minimal increasing bullish volume. So that is still a good sign to have it be increasing bullish volume. But nonetheless, we're actually seeing even our peak bearish volume didn't come in that much. But not necessarily a completely bad sign, since selling pressure has tapered off. But yeah, like we said, 54% of a pullback, putting in a new lower low. Not necessarily the best structure for MATIC right now, especially since we have been getting a lot of slow push to the upside ever since coming off of the fall. Now, a lot of this MATIC chart is going to come down to the weekly analysis. And what's kind of crazy about this chart is that we're actually more or less long-term consolidating and kind of putting in a big long-term accumulation zone. And the reason this doesn't look like a lot of other altcoin charts is that because we have seen such huge gains, and the initial pullback was actually coming in from the all-time high, where we were looking first at a pullback of about 90% down to the low of June 2022. So that wasn't even our low of the move yet when we were looking at a lot of altcoins. So this was kind of the bottom of the bear market, which wasn't even, for example, like down at the FTX lows back in November of 2022. So what we're really seeing right now is just a lot of kind of sideways chop trading, where we are setting our low, putting in a high, which was obviously less than the all-time high right now, but on this pullback for a bear market, kind of long-term consolidating right now, putting in higher low, lower high, and then so far put in that higher low. So whether or not we can rally and actually break this top right now is going to be pretty important to actually look at, but probably it will take a little bit. Not necessarily thinking, just like the rest of the cryptos, that we're not going to necessarily rally and see a break above and new trend highs. So probably most crypto in this instance will actually lead to a little bit more longer term consolidation, I would expect. Not putting in new trend highs soon, but kind of more or less seeing a lower high, higher low, and then probably putting something in new in a couple of months or so. So probably not necessarily that much. And so even looking at this MATIC chart, like we talked about, huge pullback and obviously breaking just such a huge structure. And on this move, we were actually looking pretty decent, trying to maintain a lot of these supports from the EMAs on the weekly. But what we ended up happening is just huge pullback. And like we said, not necessarily that much volume. In fact, decreasing week over week bearish volume, but 5 weeks of pullback nonetheless, breaking this weekly structure. Very ugly pullback, especially breaking support from the EMAs substantially. So it's not like even in this instance where we barely just broke support on the EMAs for the weekly, we substantially broke it. and even putting in a lot of lower lows. But like we see on this weekly chart, long lower shadow still here. So we are still putting in a little bit more of that longer term weekly support. For a long-term weekly support, we are looking at about 70.9 cents. So that is where we are finding our point, where we are hoping to rally above that. But up overhead, still plenty of resistance, specifically first at about 77 cents. And then up above that, we will be looking pretty much right at the 85-cent level. So a lot of things to go, and 85 cents actually aligns kind of with this weekly EMA as well. And so even you can see on this kind of, like we talked about, long-term consolidation over the last couple of years, still have kind of had these EMAs that have been kind of more or less zigzagging and haven't really had a confirmation of direction. So we had a little bit of upside, a little brief bullish flip, and then finally retracing back bearish again. A little bit of upside, bullish cross, and then probably going to lose that once again. So realistically, we're not necessarily looking at these as being much of a guide, since they haven't really been consistent and haven't really been reliable too much, just as you can see on this overall chart. Now, one of the things for this weekly chart, though, is actually want to turn on technical indicators, specifically looking at RSI and stochastic RSI. So you can see that if we actually zoom out, even on the last two attempts, we barely got to the 70 line on the RSI before pulling back and having our significant retracement. So kind of what we're expecting right now. And from that, we look at the stochastic RSI, big bear cross, pulled back below the 20 line, hit essentially kind of right around the 1 to 0 line, which is about what we're at right now. You can see the blue line's kind of smashed against the 0 line right now. And so essentially looking for that bullish cross to ultimately happen. And then from there, that kind of does kickstart, as we can see, once we actually start the next leg of upside. That's pretty important as well. So we know that on these retracements, we still can go lower, but we also know that we are maintaining this higher low on this longer term weekly consolidation type pattern. So we are still expecting a little bit of upside, although it probably won't be that significant. But nonetheless, the real key is whether or not we're going to be able to rally up and actually reclaim support on top of these EMAs and actually continue a bullish trend on the exponential moving averages and follow the guide of the rest of the crypto space. Now, like we said, we haven't really seen the performance out of Polygon MATIC like we have seen out of some of the other L2s right now. So we might be looking at a lot more shift and hype and focus into some of those other L2s. And so that's kind of why looking at this performance with respect to how the other L2s are performing and also its position in the market cap rankings will be a very good guide to see what kind of performance we'll actually have as we do progress in this bullish cycle. So yeah, overall things are pretty rough out of Polygon MATIC right now. Really what I want to see is basically a break above this heart line of consolidation that's kind of coming in right around the 85-cent line. If we do see that, there'll be a lot more hope, and then hopefully eventually we can get back above the $1 psychological level. If that happens, there will be a much stronger case for continued upside for MATIC. Otherwise, the longer we do kind of sit below this level, the more likely we are to return to some of the lows that we experienced back around 50 cents, unfortunately. So that's kind of what we are looking at, and we're hoping that the rest of the crypto space can actually propel Polygon MATIC to actually see some more of those gains as well, because this overall pullback is just so rough right now for MATIC, because it took a lot of effort and upside for even not that much minimal volume, and then we actually have even less minimal volume selling pressure to wipe out all those gains and actually put in a new lower low for price. So pretty rough structure from a technical standpoint. And yeah, that's why those levels are so key and critical. But yeah, definitely let me know your thoughts, comments, issues, predictions, all that stuff down in the comment sections below. Do love getting back to you. And otherwise, that is going to go ahead and wrap up the show for Polygon MATIC, MATIC on that ticker. Don't forget to drop me a follow over on Twitter or X if you haven't done so just yet. Do look forward to chatting with everyone. At coin_trades is the handle over there. If you did enjoy the video, please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe if you have not done so just yet. Do appreciate all the continued love and support. As always, does mean so much. Stay safe, take care, and I'll catch you back in the next video.